Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your favorite show on the internet, encapsulating all things entertainment. It's Entertain This!
Entertain This!
Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. I'm your host, Alex.
Woo! Woo! Yeah!
Woo!
Please applause.
Now do your guys'.
I'm contestant number 1. He's from right in your backyard.
Why are you in there? Why
I don't know. Michael Savoya.
Wow.
And weighing in at pounds in this corner.
No one asked you to do that.
Wow, okay. Shut down my bit.
No, keep doing your bit. I mean, no one asked you to bring up your weight.
It's Chloe.
Come on, Bruce Buffer, you got it.
They do the weight categories.
Yeah.
Oh.
What's your nickname?
The Crusher.
Chloe the
Second.
Crusher. Incredible.
Did I do it?
That's
I would have gone
fun.
with Chloe the Hasbro price.
Baby Chloe, baby's first price.
Oh no, I was thinking Fisher Price. Damn it!
Yeah, it's all right.
Fisher Price.
He said
Club. It doesn't-
Hasbro price.
God damn it! I got my
Hasbro
baby brands mixed up.
This is
Fuck.
Unbelievable.
This is a fun bit though. This can be our opener. If you guys had a wrestling name, what would it be?
Ooh.
Like legitimately though. So like, if you had to come up with like you're a WWE backyard wrestler. What's your wrestler name?
God, that is such.
What
a
do they
hard
usually
question.
sound like?
So like Sawbone or like Burgermeister or like the Bandit or like Sticky Underwear, like stuff like that.
Yeah, there are some incredible. So like there's like the Macho Man, which is incredible.
The Undertaker.
The Undertaker is a classic.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, the Hulk.
It's just
Can
fun.
I be the Great Ball of Fire?
Sting? Goodness gracious, it's the Great Ball of Fire.
The crowd goes
That's-
wild.
Here
very
I
good.
just did like a quick search of some. This is one of my favorites I've ever seen. For Billy
Okay.
Gunn, it's Mr. Ass with the with
That's me. That's
the
mine.
two
I want
A's are
that
dollar
one.
signs
Mr.
like Kesha.
I want that one. I want to be Mr. Az with 2 Z's.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, weighing in at... I stole your bit. Mr. Az. All right, Mike, what's yours?
I don't know. Let's see.
Mike
I
the
want
Spike.
Mike the Spike. I don't know. I would want to do something like Italian Stallion related, like Rocky Balboa. That'd be good. I've got no clue though. I'm gonna do like
The Italian Scallion.
the Italian Scallion. I like it.
And then you come out with a whole onion and you just eat it.
Yeah,
Right there on
And I do it with like lobster claws on. Just lean real hard into the seafood theme.
That's a scallop.
Yeah. So
Isn't this... Wait, what is the
no,
stem?
you're right. I'm just dumb.
What is the stem
I
of
got
an
them
onion
mixed
chop?
up.
That's a scallion, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Chloe, you were fact checker before you were a host. What?
I'm pretty
What's
sure
the answer?
scallions are little pieces of green onion.
Okay, so I was right. You just come on stage and eat an onion,
Yeah, there we go.
and you throw it in the crowd, and then you do it with lobster claws anyway because it's badass.
No, I just pull like a Stone Cold Steve Austin. I get like 2 onions instead of 2 beers. I smash them together and then I just eat both of them.
You get an onion and a lobster, and you smash them together. And you get
If someone
you
were
got
to be
yourself
the
stew.
antithesis of Stone Cold Steve Austin, would they be like boiling water Steve Austin?
I think they'd be
Mm.
Cold Stone Steve Austin. They just serve
Nah.
ice cream.
Hot steam
Stone.
Austin.
Sauna room Steve Austin.
I'm Cold Stone Austin Steve. I just work at Cold Stone, and my name is Austin. That guy's out there somewhere, and I want him to write into the show, please. Okay, let's switch topics a little bit. Similar question, different format. If you were a superhero, what would your name be? I'll go first.
So
it's obvious. Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, you can't just be Spider-Man, Alex. It's not how it works.
Bullshit. Who's playing? Who's the host here? Whose episode is it? I'll do it a goddamn please.
This is my house, and I play Spider-Man this time.
Yeah.
But you always play Spider-Man.
Shut up!
If you don't like it, you could take your mask and go home.
I don't know. It's got to be like related to your powers first. So there's like a preceding question here that's got to be answered. Like, what would your power be if you were a superhero?
Yeah, it's a lot based on that.
Honestly, my power would be like Spider-Man's powers, but without the spider parts. So just being like really witty and annoying and being able to take a punch. Like, that's about it. So I'd probably be the smart. I'd probably still be Mr. Az.
You'd be Mr.
Smart As.
Smart Alex.
Yeah, Smart Alex. And they're like,
the Smart Alex.
You'll never guess my secret identity. Is your name Alex? Damn it! How did you ever guess?
God, yeah, I don't even know what superpower I'd want to have. Like, I obviously love, like, I'm a big fan of like weather control shit. Like, I'm a big fan of Storm.
Yeah, that's the cool stuff. But if we're talking like what superpower will we actually end up with?
Yeah,
I think you have prehensile facial hair. I think that's what you get.
Either that or crippling depression, man.
Do you depress others? Because then I think you're a super villain. How does your power manifest? You just take really good naps and
like I imagine it's like
eats a bowl of Captain Crunch in a single sitting. It's depression, man.
No, I was thinking like given all the tools to succeed, like can fly, super strong, like basically Superman, but he's too depressed to actually be a superhero.
Oh,
depression man, able to stop a train because he refuses to get off the tracks.
What's the point?
It'll stop. Oh, depression is very serious. Anyway,
of course.
We'll
drop some resources down below.
Well,
you decided Michael's.
You can find them in your own time, the resources. I don't know. I don't want to link people to the wrong stuff, and Nick's not here to do it anymore.
No more show notes.
Right. Well, I still do them, but not in the same way. Chloe's superpower. Honestly, Chloe, your superpower is probably like the ability to magically shoot stuffed animals out of your arms. Which,
but
like,
the stuffed animals are full of cement. That's
no.
The twist.
Oh no, I was thinking like you would be like the physical embodiment of like a Squishmallow.
Whoa, yeah, squishy. Instead of Chloe, you'd be squishy. It'd be like Miss Marvel's ability to like get to like biggin, except your biggins would not pack a punch. They instead would be very soft. So like you could like fill your arm with foam and like catch a toddler who's falling off a building.
Oh, and I could like wrap the villain in a big hug and be like, "See, it's gonna be okay, buddy. You don't have to do this."
I love
and then we beat the shit out of him.
Just bounce him against the Squishmallow.
Right.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah,
you like punch the villain like it just.
Dogs are going to be running from miles away.
Your arch nemesis, dogs.
Please don't rip my fragile felt exterior.
Well, I think that this topic of conversation perfectly walks us into today's subject that I am going to be talking about. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Huh? So, as life becomes ever more complicated, I find myself daydreaming more often. Not to be a huge downer on what's supposed to be a semi-comedy podcast, but shit is bad. I think that kind of goes without saying.
It's not great.
I'm not going to list all the crazy stuff that the world has been through in the past 5 years, but I feel I speak for all of us in saying escapism is a necessity at this point. But I digress. You know?
Yeah.
In these moments, as I lose myself in thought, I imagine a world where the solutions to life's problems are simple. The complicated day-to-day is just black and white, good and bad. We knew the reasons why people did things and knew for certain why they were evil without having to question their motives. More so, I think of a solution for that kind of fantasy world. I think of how simple it would be to fix the wrongs by simply locking up the wrongdoers and being a hero, maybe even being a superhero. That's what we're going to talk about today. So suit up, mask up, and entertain this.
Woo!
Nice.
I got some questions to start us off.
Let's do it.
So let's get into them. In your guys' opinion, what makes a superhero?
They're usually somebody who has some kind of like spectacular ability, something that human beings could never do.
Yeah, there is like a mystical nature to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, especially in publication, most superheroes have like some sort of a cosmic power or mutation of some sort that makes them different or makes them quote unquote super, you know?
Yeah.
So what do you see as qualities of superheroes? Like
yeah, like always standing
other
up
than that, like the power, you know?
Right. Like always standing up for someone who can't stand up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like at its core what it's about.
Sure. I think that's what a lot of people would say, that at the core, a superhero is someone who does good. Like that's their job. They protect and serve, for lack of better words.
They protect and they attack.
Yes, correct. Chloe, what do you think?
Well, you know, it's interesting because we've had so many permutations on the superhero story. And at this point, you know, anyone could don the mask, right? But I think they do tend to gravitate towards characters who care about the little guy, maybe have faced some kind of diversity of their own, and are kind of indomitable, you know, like can't really... They take a lot of knocks, but they keep getting back up.
Sure. So here's my next question that we can sort of debate is, what is the difference between a superhero and just, you know, your average person when it kind of comes down to it? So not the powers, not what quantifies being a superhero, but like when just looking at them, comparing them, what is the difference between what a superhero is and what an everyday person is?
Really not as much as you'd think. Because like in my mind, it's that willingness to jump in the face of danger.
I think it all comes down to that one moment where it's like, am I going to act or am I going to stand to the side and hope that somebody else does something? And superheroes are the people that act.
Yeah,
sure. So let's talk, instead of differences, what maybe the similarities could be between a superhero and your average person.
Yeah. For me, like looking back on that last answer, like it is just that willingness. Like really that's it. Like an everyday person can become a superhero in an instant. Whether that's for like the world or even at just like an individual level, like anybody can step up and be a superhero for any other person.
Yeah, I think that's true. The idea of a superhero has kind of been deep rooted within our society for so long that, I mean, we've started equating everyday people to superheroes. You know, firefighters are superheroes, doctors, paramedics are superheroes, you know, people's moms, they're superheroes, astronauts, superheroes. You know, it's what a superhero has sort of become in the mainstay is just something to set yourself towards and a goal to set yourself towards. Like, I want to be that because they are my hero, you know?
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it kind of leaves the idea of superheroes in this vagueness that feels like it's been around forever, when in fact, that's not necessarily the case. Today, I want to explore kind of the history of superheroes and eventually lead it up to what the modern day superhero looks like and how it got there. specifically in comic book publication.
Nice.
With a little bit of movie here and there. So let's talk about the first superhuman ever to be published. The first domino that fell, leading to our modern day interpretation of a superhero, actually happened probably sooner than you think. So if you had to throw out a ballpark guess, when was the first story of a superhero ever told? Other than like
20th
the
century,
Greeks,
I would say.
Other than like Greeks having demigods and stuff like
right. Yeah, because no, that's a different category of things.
Yeah.
Like that may come from the same place, but no, it's I would what, like the 20s, the 30s.
So maybe it's a little bit later than you guys think, or maybe a little bit earlier.
I guess for me, like if I'm thinking like comic book publication situation, it's like early Superman.
Yeah,
like
a lot of people would say that Superman is one of the first superheroes. A lot of people would argue he is the first, but I'm here to tell you those people are wrong. The first superhero ever to reach publication happened in 1902.
Wow.
So we're talking early 20th century.
Just barely.
Early 20th century, almost late 19th century. It was 1902 with Wilhelm Henrik Detlev Corners. It's German. Come on, guys, stick with me. Publication of a one-panel comic called Hugo Hercules in the Chicago Tribune.
Interesting.
It makes sense that it started with a newspaper comic.
Yeah. A little bit about our hero, Hugo Hercules. He was a good-natured man endowed with superhuman strength. Hugo wandered about town, helping people with their problems and shocking him with his surprising display of power. He was so strong that he could pick up an elephant, kick a house like a football, wield an artillery cannon like a handgun, and lift a locomotive engine off the tracks and pull its cargo all by himself at train speeds.
Nice. I love it.
He was an everyman, so he was casual about his incredible feats. Hugo often repeated his catchphrase, "Just as easy." He would do something and be like, "It's that easy. There it is." He would then be sort of shrugging off what he had just done to the adoring crowds, and just like, "It's that easy. Don't think of me as a hero. I just did it. You could do it too," which is neat.
An everyman.
So
yeah, I'm looking at like some of his old comic strips, and yeah, this is like just straight up like
it's almost political comic.
Yeah, it looks very political comic-y.
Yeah, man. Sometimes referred to as the first superhero, the strip was not a great success, running only 1 year. After that, Corner eventually left comics to become a painter.
Oh,
I mean, I'd imagine like if that's like really all this character was, it's gonna get a little stale after a while.
Well, yeah, you would think that.
But
then you think to all of the like superheroes that are in publication, and you're like, it's kind of the same thing. The only thing about this was I feel like Hugo set the bar. He set a low bar, but he at least set the bar. Like, this is a story that could be told. I don't want to explore it anymore, but somebody else could. And I think that's what was the, spark that lit the fire that later became comic book publication. So we kind of see Hugo as being the first quote unquote superhero because he walked around and he helped people. But first off, he went by his name, Hugo Hercules.
Yeah.
And what he was doing wasn't necessarily, we'll say, doomsday level saving. He was, doing your casual, everyday Good Samaritan saving. He just also had super strength, right?
Right, yeah.
So the question then lies is, do we quantify that as being a quote-unquote superhero? And if not, what would quantify a superhero? And so I kind of laid out my own ideas of what could, if that's not the definition of a superhero, what could be. And I think one of the big things is a secret identity and a hidden double life, right? So that brings us to our next step in the chain of what a superhero was, starting with Zorro, actually, being the first masked vigilante. For those of you who don't know, Zorro is Spanish for fox.
Mm-hmm.
Chloe just made a very happy face.
Did not know that. Love it a lot.
So Zorro is a fictional character created in 1919 by American pulp writer Johnson McCulley, appearing in works set in the pueblo of Los Angeles in Alta California. He is typically portrayed as a dashing, masked vigilante who defends the commoners and indigenous people of California against corrupt and tyrannical officials and other villains. His signature all-black costume includes a cape, a hat known as a sombrero cordobés. I don't speak Spanish either.
Wow,
and
2 languages.
And a mask covering up half of his face. So we know Zorro as... what's the actor's name? The guy from Spy Kids.
Antonio Banderas.
Yes.
Antonio Banderas.
Antonio Banderas.
But would you believe
And the rapier is something that I always associate with Zorro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Antonio Banderas. But would you believe that Antonio Banderas was not the first to execute the character of Zorro on the silver screen?
I would believe that.
Yeah.
Because Zorro was also the first time a superhero made an appearance on the silver screen in a movie called The Mark of Zorro, only 1 year after original publication in 1920. The first ever superhero movie.
Gotcha.
Nice. Wouldn't have guessed Zorro.
Who was Zorro in that movie?
I don't know the actor's name off the top of my head.
What's the movie called?
It's called The
Mark.
The Mark of Zorro.
Sorry, it's very confusing because the first Antonio Banderas movie is The Mask of Zorro.
Maybe a reference.
Franklin Gala, I think. Let's see. Who's the mentor? Because that'd be cool as hell if in The Mask of Zorro, the mentor is the original actor who played Zorro.
Be interesting. Something for you guys to look up on your free time. I'm going to keep going. Some people would argue that the Zorro does not quantify as a superhero because he actually does not have any superpower. He is just a skilled swordsman and a masked vigilante. So for some people, they don't even consider him to be the first superhero. Now, if we're talking legitimate first superhero, like I said, I am adding filter after filter until we get to a solid definition. We have a secret identity and a superpower.
Yeah.
Hell, just for kicks and giggles, I'll throw in a colorful costume. If that's what we're talking, then the first ever superhero was a hero called the Phantom.
The Phantom. Okay. Never heard of it.
Not of the opera.
Not of the opera specifically, and also not of DC.
The Menace.
Or the Menace, and not specifically of DC or Marvel publication either. The first superhero did not come from either of them. But it was created by Lee Falk, the Phantom, who debuted in his own comic or his own newspaper comic strip on the 17th of February of 1936, is basically what some people consider to be the very first superhero. In this first comic strip, it recounted the adventures of Kit Walker, who donned a mask and purple outfit to become the Phantom, aka the Ghost Who Walks. The character's whited out eyes with no visible pupils became a feature of many later superheroes, including Batman, Green Lantern, and Green Arrow. The series began with a newspaper strip, followed by a colored Sunday strip on May 20th of 1939. Both are still running as of 2022.
Wow.
So he's still out there.
Damn.
In 1966, King Features stated that the Phantom was being published in 583 newspapers worldwide, and at its peak, the strip was read over 100 million people daily. So there was a following.
Yeah. So what was his power?
His power was that he basically could not die. He was unkillable.
Gotcha. Because the first image I find of him is just him with a gun.
Yeah. But his superpower is he is unable to die.
Well, yeah, then the gun makes perfect sense in that case.
So this series began on February 17th, 1936. And for you comic book fans out there who are like, Superman was the first superhero. Fine. But Superman wasn't published until 2 years later. So the Phantom did technically beat him by 2 years. But you know what? Let's just talk about Superman. We all want to talk about, everybody wants to talk about Superman. Let's just talk about Superman.
You can't not talk about Superman when you talk about superheroes.
We're going to talk about Superman, but I want to first state that the Phantom definitely inspired the work of DC Comics, who 2 years later would release their first superhero, Superman. And what I will say is Superman was definitely the comic that kicked off what was known as the golden age of comics.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with sort of the different eras or ages of comic books?
I don't know of any outside of the golden age.
Well, by the end of this episode, you will, because we're going to talk about it. Starting with the golden age of comics. So the golden age of comic books is recognized as being kicked off by the publication of Action Comics #1, which was the introduction of Superman and the archetype of a superhero in general. This was the idea of somebody with a ton of superpowers who basically could save the world from an apocalypse level event. That was not something that we had seen yet. We also, in this era, would see the introduction of Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Captain America, and many more iconic superheroes, as well as the predecessors to many of our prized comic book companies, such as Detective Comics, DC, Timely Comics, which would then become Marvel Comics. And many of these superheroes can be seen fighting America's real-life enemies, such as Hitler, providing a national kind of conglomerate to face off against Hitler at home, if maybe you couldn't be a part of the armed troops to make it feel like you were kind of a part of it. This was also provided to the troops for a much-needed morale boost, along with cheap entertainment. Something that is kind of explored in the Marvel movie Captain America, the First Avenger.
Yeah.
Where he literally is exactly that. He is used as a sort of propaganda machine and at one point. And that's where we were with the golden age of comics, was this sort of, it was for kids and it was propaganda. That's what needs to be understood. Captain America was created to say, America's great. We're supposed to be in this war. We have to save these people. And yes, especially in World War II, that was the case. But it was still propaganda. God love them.
A lot of print media and comics, like you see Dr. Seuss, you see Disney, are doing this like legitimate political propaganda during this time.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's crazy.
So with the golden age of comics, in the late 1940s, additional genres started to appear, such as westerns, sci-fis, and detective stories. I have an old collection of comic books, and it is chock full of all of these. But there were some murmurs in the crowd and a belief growing amongst some more conservative of the population. They were asking a very simple question, and one that the answer was sort of hard to give, which is, what are these comic books doing to the minds of our children? Something that every form of entertainment has faced at one point or another.
Yeah. If it's not the Bible, it's scrutinized.
So what did that question lead to?
I do my fair share of scrutinizing, but you know.
So the question the question is, what did that question lead to? What are these comic books doing to the minds of our children? That kind of leads us headfirst into the next age of comic books, which is the Silver Age of comics, which lasted from 1956 to 1970. The Silver Age of comics is when comic books really hit their stride and became mainstream sources of entertainment in America. Comic books covering superheroes lost popularity towards the end of the Golden Age and the beginning of the Silver Age, but quickly rose back to popularity once the content of the comic books began to be more closely regulated, in fear of spurring more juvenile delinquents from questionable content found in horror and mystery genres. This is famously known as the era where we basically got diet comic books. They took out the poverty, the murder, the real dangers to give way to an era where the Joker was just a funny little guy pulling pranks.
God, that is so disappointing.
Well, and this was a very famous era for especially Batman, because this is where Batman picks up his "I don't kill people" mentality. Where actually
Oh,
a lot of superheroes pick up their "I don't kill people" mentality, because if our superheroes killed people, then it seemed like it was okay.
which that's so funny compared to like the comics that were coming out when like we were kids, like in the 90s and the early 2000s, where it was all about that like morality of like, oh, like I'm a superhero, but sometimes I'll kill a guy to get the
Yeah,
job done.
that's kind of the funny thing about how it all started, because in the golden age, that is what it was. That's where we started, was
Right.
like superheroes would kill people. Like, I mean, the Phantom carried around a gun. You saw that.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it worked. But
Well, in
yeah,
Captain America was fighting in wars where it was like
with
you
a
gotta
gun.
kill. Yeah, you gotta kill people.
Captain America had a gun in his first couple issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was that kind of publication that led into the Silver Age of comic books.
Well, I guess like when like we're talking about like the comics from when we were in like the 90s and early 2000s, like that was specifically meant to be that like counterculture to that ultra sanitized version of comics that we had for so long.
Yeah, and I mean, what we lost in the Silver Age of comics was um, the ability to see these superheroes as human or as relatable figures, because they were no longer facing things the way we would. I mean, Superman could take a bullet to the chest and be unscathed, you know? We can't say, oh, hey, there's a piece of us in Superman, you know? Because Superman's not even from this planet. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at with the Silver Age of comics. This was basically to attract a child demographic and their more strict parents who didn't approve of the themes of the Golden Age of comics. But luckily, this also sort of left a large pocket of about roughly 12 years, more like roughly 18 years, really, where a young Stan Lee was growing up reading comic books. And so throughout Stan Lee's age of comic books, it was all superheroes who were these, you know, towering titans who you could never stand up to, lived on a pedestal, and basically were gods, modern day gods that we couldn't relate to. So we can kind of thank the Silver Age of comics, because what was happening near the end of the Silver Age of comics was Stan Lee took on a writing role in I think it was originally, I think maybe Titan or Timely Comics. That's what it was. Timely Comics, and was challenged by the editor there to basically come up with something that could rival Superman, because at the time Superman was the end all be all for superheroes. He was like, here's what you gotta do. I need you to come up with something, because basically if you don't, we're gonna fire you. Like, we're gonna shut down, we're gonna fire you. So that's where the story kind of takes a little bit of a turn into Stan Lee, which I know I am one to talk about almost endlessly. So I have scripted this out, and hopefully we can keep it in the rails. But it was near the end of the Silver Age of comics where Stan Lee's genius truly shines, because you see Stan Lee question the style in which comics were written. It was actually the Silver Age being the only way he ever had known comics. Up until this point, superheroes had been framed as these morally pure beings with no want or need for personal gain. Their stories had been black and white, as the world I fantasized about. It wasn't until Stan Lee asked, why aren't they like us? That these heroes finally took on an engaging and human trait worth a lot of the sort of hype that led them to the silver screen today. Lee wanted to introduce the idea that when the mask came off, these quote-unquote heroes were people too. He once recounted that when he shared this idea with his wife, he was on the edge of being fired, and he was told to come up with something original to compete with the growing popularity of Superman. And he wasn't sure if making a more human superhero would fit the bill. His wife basically told him to give it a shot and swing for the fences, because the worst they could do was fire him. So it was on that he took the jump. Lee decided to write about heroes in their most vulnerable state, which is sort of very important. And I think you guys will see where I'm going with this, because he recognized that if I wanted to tell a story about people who just so happen to be superheroes, the best way to tell that story is to tell about a family of superheroes. A mom, a dad, maybe a brother, an uncle, 2 kids. And that's where we get the Fantastic Four.
I love it.
More so, he wanted to talk about the day-to-day and what it was like as they struggled living together alongside saving the world. They were considered the first family of superheroes, and of course, it was a huge success.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the reason that people can't like connect with Superman is because he is an alien entity. He has like, he doesn't understand the wants and needs of humans, and like when you imagine him alone, you just picture him like staring at a wall, because what else is he supposed to do? He's not human.
Right. And that was the big issue that like a lot, I know that like I have with like him being this extraterrestrial being. Like he went from this mystical human that you could connect with from the farm, like with his mom and dad.
He could have just been a country boy, but no, he's an alien.
Yeah. But no,
doesn't even understand earthly customs.
Yeah, and I feel like the connection alongside it just being like a family is also the idea, and I'm sure this is an original for the Fantastic Four, but them making it so that these were regular people that changed.
No, that is that developed with the Fantastic Four. They were the first to ever do that.
Yeah, so it's like that whole idea of like, oh, like in some weird way, like this could actually happen. It's not just like an alien. It's like, no, like they just radiated, or whatever the premise was for the original Fantastic Four. And now
what if a meteor landed in your backyard? What if
because
you
Stan
fell
Lee
in
was
a vat of acid?
The message was this could have happened to anybody, but it happened to them.
Yeah.
You know, and that also led us to the sort of last hero to grace the Silver Age of comics in 1962. A young teenage boy with no money, just trying to make his way in the world while also being a superhero, Mr. Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
Never heard of him.
Shut the fuck up.
It's not ringing any bells.
Actually, Spider-Man went to high school with Johnny Storm, also known as the Human Torch. They were classmates, and often Spider-Man would go over to the Baxter Building and as Spider-Man and be a part of the Fantastic Four, because they were the only 2 superheroes at the time from Marvel Comics. So they would blend and mesh.
Which like starts a long-standing tradition of Spider-Man being the bridge between all the different comic series.
That's so true.
But I mean, we did an episode on Spider-Man, so I won't get too into Spider-Man as a whole. But Spider-Man, if I would say the Fantastic Four walked so Spider-Man could run, because the Fantastic Four was the test and Spider-Man was the execution on this idea of this could have happened to anybody, but it happened to him. This could literally be anybody. It doesn't have to be this like specific person. Anyone can wear the mask. That's a huge thing that we talk about in the Spider-Man episode. But this idea that he is just like us and any of us could have done this, you know? That's what Stan Lee wanted to sell with these comics, and he was, you know, successful with it. It's one of the reasons why comic books still have a life today. And it was these real characters and real situations that would actually walk us into our next era of comic books, the Bronze Age of comic books. So the Bronze Age was from 1970 to 1985. And we saw a continuation of the popular characters, but with a return to darker plots regarding real-life issues seen in the early golden ages, such as drug use, poverty, and pollution. Unlike the previous ages, there was no clear event that kicked off the Bronze Age, but rather an undeniable trend in the industry overall kicked off by Stan Lee. It also marks the end of many great writers' careers and ushered a new, younger writer that put their own spin on storylines, basically. Out with the old, in with the new. So let's go over a couple of events that kind of lifted us into the Bronze Age. Instead of a number of events, It just kind of began in the 1970s, and it just kept kind of spiraling until we found ourselves in a new era of comics. But one such event,
when the 9 old men left Disney and they had to figure out something else to do.
That's basically it. So one such event was April of 1970 issue of Green Lantern, which added Green Arrow as a title character. The series, written by Denny O'Neil and penciled by Neil Adams, focused on relevance as Green Lantern was exposed to poverty and experienced self-doubt. So we're seeing him basically take a book out of Stan Lee's, or take a page out of Stan Lee's book, rather. Later in 1970, Jack Kirby left Marvel Comics, ending arguably the most important creative partnership of the Silver Age with Stan Lee. Kirby then turned to DC, where he created the Fourth World series of titles, starting with Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen in December of 1970. Also in 1970, Mort Weisner, a long-term editor of various Superman titles, retired to be replaced by Julius Schwartz. Schwartz set about toning down the more fanciful aspects of Weisner's era, removing most kryptonite from continuity and scaling back Superman's nigh infinite by then powers, which was done by veteran artist Kurt Swan together with groundbreaking author Denny O'Neil. So this is where we see Superman get nerfed.
Yeah.
Because like Chloe was saying, he wasn't relatable. So we had to let him die. We had to, take away some of his powers. We had to make Superman one thing. You know that part from I Think You Should Leave, where it's like, find out what you do. You had all summer to think about it. Find out what you do. Like, that's what they did to Superman at this point.
Yeah, because you got to have like a thing. You can't just be everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, otherwise everything gets boring. It's like, all right, like what's Superman gonna pull out of his ass to beat Doomsday this time?
Yeah, he's unkillable. Nobody can even go up against him. It's unrealistic.
Yeah, because like at this point, had kryptonite even been a thing?
Yeah, so kryptonite has always kind of been a thing. This is where they were like the death of Superman. Like Superman dies in this one, But another kind of important thing that happened was this is when we started to see the death of other kinds of comic books. So like how there used to be old Westerns and like war and like soldier comic books. We started seeing a death of those as superhero comics sort of started way overlapping them.
I definitely think of Zorro as a Western like comic style story.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So
swashbuckler kind of vibes.
So over time, the medium shifted to cheap mass market products sold at newsstands, to more expensive products sold at specialty comic book shops and aimed at smaller core audience of fans. So this is when we start seeing the birth of those locations where basically you go and it's just full of comics and that's it. The shift in distribution allowed for many small print publishers to enter the market, changing the medium from one dominated by a few large publishers to a more diverse and eclectic range of books. So we see a little bit more artistry go into the publication of these comics, which we can now thank for a lot of cool titles that we have today, like the Critical Role series of comics that were able to be published. Dark Horse is another really important one. Another thing that happened in the Bronze Age of comics as we shift more towards the dark was a very famous Spider-Man story, one that basically completely changed the tone of Spider-Man and set him in the world where we know him as now, and it was the murder of Spider-Man's longtime girlfriend, Gwen Stacy. Up until this point, Spider-Man had not been with Mary Jane, and in fact, Mary Jane wasn't introduced until this era of comics. Instead, his love interest was someone by the name of Gwen Stacy. Of course, blonde hair. We all kind of have an image in our head of what she looks like from especially the Andrew Garfield movies. But when Mary Jane entered, there was a poll taken from comic book readers as to which one should end up with Spider-Man, and Mary Jane won. And because of that, Gwen Stacy basically got the boot.
Absolutely brutal.
At the hands of Green Goblin, of all things. So this happened in 1973, Amazing Spider-Man number 121 and 122. and it is considered by comic scholar Aaron T. Bloomberg to be the definitive Bronze Age event, as it exemplifies the period's trend towards darker territories and willingness to subvert conventions such as the assumed survival of long-established, quote-unquote, untouchable characters. However, there had been a gradual darkening of the tone of superhero comics for several years prior to the night Gwen Stacy died, including the death of her father in 1970, in Amazing Spider-Man number 90, and the beginning of the Dennis O'Neil, Neil Adams tenure on Batman, where things were starting to get very dark. So that's kind of a too long didn't read of the Bronze Age of comic books. This was also where we started seeing stuff like Iron Man, who confronts his alcoholism, and the socially conscious stories written by Steven Gerber, and such titles as Howard the Duck. Yep, Howard the Duck, in case you were wondering or have never read his comics, is not a comedy. In fact, Howard the Duck is usually in some of the worst situations in the world, and the entertainment comes from the fact that he is an anthropomorphic duck who is facing drug addiction, who is facing like being in love with someone who is a part of the sex working industry, and things like that. Like Howard the Duck has it hard. There's a cool little side tangent I could go on about Howard the Duck and how his original author and the guy who created the character stole him back from DC when they basically took him by creating a comic book where Howard the Duck got cloned so many times that you could no longer tell which one was the real Howard the Duck. And then in a separate publication, he had a hero come in and grab the real Howard the Duck and run off with him. He basically stole Howard the Duck back from the publishers and left them with a clone of Howard the Duck, which is hilarious. You should look that up. It's a very interesting thing that happened in comic book history. But
this is our duck.
It was also in the Bronze Age of comics that we saw issues regarding female empowerment become trends, with female versions of popular male characters such as Spider-Woman, who is of course the female version of Spider-Man, Red Sonja, who is I believe the female version of Daredevil, but I may be wrong there. Oh no, I actually think that she is the female version of a different character. I wonder who
what was the name again?
Let's see. Red
Sonja. Miss Marvel, who at the time Captain Marvel was actually a male. So Miss Marvel was who we now consider to be Captain Marvel. That's a very confusing thing that happened as well, because originally Captain Marvel's name was Shazam, and then Shazam became a DC character, and then Captain Marvel became what Shazam was, and then we made a female version called Miss Marvel, who later then became Captain Marvel, and that's how we ended up with the Captain Marvel we have today, and also She-Hulk, of course. So,
and that kind of like calls into like things where it's like one of my favorite parts about comics, especially like superhero comics, throughout their entire history, they've been at the forefront of like socio-political issues.
Yeah.
Like they've always, especially, which is like super ironic going back to their beginnings of being these propaganda pieces for, like
in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And like, it's just so cool that like there is this recorded history of comics being on the side of like progressivism and like wanting to push the boundary to make it more acceptable for whatever issue they're pioneering.
Yeah. So this all kind of sets the precedent for the modern age, which started in 1985, but this is also known as the dark age of comic books. Basically, we took things that were getting bad in the Bronze Age and we made them worse. This is where things get really bad. This is where we have stuff like Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, stuff like that. Some graphic novels that get pretty bad. We see stuff like Venom.
What do you mean by bad?
Death, killing.
Okay.
Almost every issue, like Venom eating people.
Yeah.
It gets dork.
Right. Well, but then you like if you take like Watchmen into it, like that is meant to be a like commentary on the
superheroes, right?
On superheroes as a whole, and this like putting them on a pedestal despite them being garbage people.
Yeah, absolutely. This is also where we saw things like the Joker being portrayed as less of an evil criminal and more of a mentally ill psychopath that can't control his actions. or, you know, characters like Galactus, who is a force of nature who has no personal malice against his feedings. He just has to eat worlds. He's hungry. That's why he does it. You know,
he's hungry. He's a big boy. He's got to eat.
But all of this leads the way to what I really want to be talking about, and I'm going to talk about with the last 10 minutes that I have of this episode. Maybe I'll go a little over. I don't know. It depends on where we are, which is a comic book series that kind of came out of left field. Didn't come from Marvel. Didn't come from DC. It was through all of this information that I have given you that our walk concludes at the grand view I really want to talk about. The combination of comic book history and the works of Stan Lee and so many others, the changing tides and vibes of the industry that has gone through all the culminations in a title I deem as being the epitome of the modern era, and was actually written by the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way. Yeah, look at that face, Mike.
Excuse me, what?
That was kind of the face Alex made too.
The author of this amazing series of comic books is the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way. It is known as The Umbrella Academy.
Oh, yeah.
Turns out he's a great writer.
Wow.
Yeah. It is an Eisner-winning comic book series written by Gerard Way and illustrated by Gabriel Ba. The series, that it basically bleeds references to comic book history and heavy ties to the influences from Stan Lee's work in the 1960s, as well as some of the work done on Superman and stuff like that. But let's just kind of get into it because I don't have much time left. Let's talk about the titular team of the Umbrella Academy, which is described as a dysfunctional family of superheroes. There we are again, a family of superheroes, because that is the most clean and honest way to frame it. In the mid-20th century, in the instance of the finishing blow of a cosmic wrestling match, 43 superpowered infants are inexplicitly born to random, unconnected women who showed no sign of pregnancy at the start of the day. So, miraculous conception.
Immaculate conception.
That too. Both.
That's what they said even about Mary, so it has to apply, right?
Yeah.
Although Mary did a full term, doesn't seem fair.
So Sir Reginald Hargreaves, aka the Monocle, adopts 7 of these children and prepares them to save the world from an unspecified threat as the Umbrella Academy. And in the comic book series Apocalypse Suite, the team disbands and falls out of contact until they meet on the news of Hargreaves' death, and they have to reunite when one of their own numbers becomes a supervillain. So the sort of personal attachment to this is about a family of people who grew up together and love each other, who separate and go and live their own lives and are brought back together when one of them goes rogue. And to throw on top of that, which is already a pretty gripping story, they all have superpowers, which is nuts. So these comics were later turned into a Netflix series that is an absolute must-watch, dealing with topics such as family trauma, self-acceptance, racism, segregation, death, and even problems with gender identity, all of which are handled in gentle, respectful, and real ways. Not to spoil too much, but just one example that I am just so happy to talk about because of how it was handled. One of the many actors and actresses who make up the television series The Umbrella Academy recently transitioned from female to male and is now going by Elliot Page, he, him pronouns. And this happened between the 2nd and 3rd season of The Umbrella Academy, the TV show. So one of their main cast members transitioned genders, and it you have to ask yourself, like, how does that affect the character? They wrote it into the script. The character also transitions to male, and it's done in a way that is kind and accepting and heartfelt. The entire family, basically, there's an episode where, I mean, it leads up naturally. It's not forced in. The character basically just says, this is who I am. This is who I've always been. And now I just want to display this way. And one by one, each character just goes, okay. And then starts calling them, I believe, Trevor. Is that right? Victor. That's right.
So their name was Vanya Hargreaves. And then one
Vanya.
day they go to the barber and they come back to their family and they say, Victor. And everybody's like,
Victor now. And everybody's like, Victor. And immediately
you got it.
they start using he, him pronouns. And the plot, they get mad at each other. They get aggravated with each other. At one point, they start fighting, like infighting between them, like real passionate, emotional fights between them. And never do they slip up. Always they use he, him pronouns. They refer to him as Victor the entire time. It is beautiful to watch. An incredible way to handle that situation. And that alone,
unprecedented in terms of television.
Has not happened. Right. Absolutely not. The first time it's happened.
Well, and especially in that way where it's like, yes, this is a big emotional part of this character, but like the best way to do it is exactly how they did it. It's just like, yeah, that's just now part of the character. It's not like a big, it's not like this big overarching theme of like the whole season or anything like that. It's just like, no, that's just
it's a thing that happens and everybody is so cool with it. Isn't it so funny how easy it can be?
It's literally that easy. And, you know, huge props to Gerard Way, who created this world where that happened. And I was like, that fits. It didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel weird because already it had the identity of these characters and who they were and how they treated each other was already laid in concrete so well that it already felt like an accepting, loving environment. And they infight. They're real people. That's what makes them gripping characters. So all of this basically to say, I suggest you guys go read and or watch The Umbrella Academy. It's well worth your time. In fact, I was going to do this entire episode on The Umbrella Academy, and then I got looped into the history of comic books. But all of this to say, if you want something that is honest to comic books and how they've worked throughout the years, if you want an culmination with excellent references to the past, the first family of superheroes, an alien coming from outer space and wreaking havoc on humanity, end of the world scenarios, apocalypses that have to be dealt with by these average people, this is the show for you, and you should go watch it. So all in all, what I want to say is, comic books are great. They've always been a part of our culture. There's a good reason to it. Most of it, we can thank Stan Lee for being the first to say, hey, what if these people were like us? And then thank you to Gerard Way, who took that a step further and said, these people are like us. And because of that, we need to be more like them. With that, entertain this.
Love it.
That's the outro. It's a call to action this time.
Will do. I've only seen the first season, so I need to go back and watch the rest of it.
You
got a lot to catch up on.
You gotta watch more.
I know.
Watch more. You deserve
it.
You deserve it.
It's for me.
Go watch more. Trust me, you deserve it. All that being said, after this musical interlude, Michael's gonna quick this. We'll see you after. And we're back. No, don't do that. When we're back.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to this week's Quick This featuring myself. I'm going to just kind of kick it off here if anyone wants to start a timer for me.
I have the timer for you.
Okay. Give me a countdown.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right. So, as Alex talked about in our episode this week, we spent a lot of time talking about superheroes and even mentioning for the little bit that period before the modern age. Well, I guess during the modern age is what you said, where we start getting these quote unquote bad comics, the ones featuring death, where things get really dark. And he even mentioned like Watchmen. Watchmen's one of the best examples of this. It's what happens when you get people placed at the highest pieces of power and they're not actually good people. But I kind of wanted to talk about some shows that kind of follow that same principle that have become pretty popular nowadays. You got The Boys on Amazon, classic example of like essentially the Justice League, just filled with a bunch of people who face zero consequences for their shitty behavior. Most notably, Homelander, who's supposed to be the boys' equivalent to Superman. Just doing it all for the American people. It's like the combination of Superman and Captain America, who turns out to just be one of the shittiest people on planet Earth, only because he's so separated from the common man that he's lost all sense of moral judgment. But what if I told you the boys wasn't even the first ones to do this? There actually was a comic. So the boys released as a comic back in 2006. But before that even happened, before they took the idea of the Justice League, another took the idea of Superman. And what if Superman was a bad person? And that's where Invincible comes in. Invincible is another show on Amazon Prime that is animated. This one features the titular character, Invincible, also known as Mark, with his dad, who is Omni-Man, who is this world's version of Superman. Alien and all, sent to be a protector for the planet Earth, has all of the normal superpowers you associate with Superman, and plays up to this character and trying to establish this repertoire across the entire globe, where he is that noble figure of light and justice and honor and all good things in the world. However, all of that is a ploy. He's actually, for what Mark is raised to believe, his dad is this alien from this virtuous race that are sent to different planets to become their protectors. But what it actually is that...
Is this spoilers?
I mean, yeah, but it's also like the whole premise of why you'd even want to watch this show in the beginning.
Okay, go ahead.
So the whole premise is that instead of them being protectors of Earth, they're actually conquerors, and they're fighters, and their entire job is to go to different planets and basically conquer the entire populace.
Oh no.
Kind of reminiscent to Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z. It's almost the exact same thing. And what is shown is that Mark grows up and he doesn't have any powers until he turns 17 in high school. That's when his powers start to develop. And for him, it is through this use of his powers that he develops them and they get stronger. But what happens if just one day you wake up and you are one of the strongest people on planet Earth? They kind of explore a little bit of that in like The Amazing Spider-Man, when Peter Parker gets bit by the spider. One of the first things we see is him accidentally breaking and wrecking his entire bathroom. Much in that same sense, just with much more dire consequences. We see a young man of 17 thrown into the hero business, trying to save people's lives without having any inkling of controlling his power. And it's through this that we see the very gruesome side effects of this. And him just trying to catch a falling old woman from a building, and he flies to go catch her, but he's moving so fast and he's so strong that she just turns into a mist of blood. And this is like one of the biggest things that you need to remember with this show. It does not stray away from the gory details of all of this business. And that's what makes it such an evocative show, and that you see that like being this ultra strong, this extraterrestrial being of like unimaginable might and power, what exactly are the consequences of that? And it's through this that it's just this incredibly good show that reminds you a lot of other series like The Boys, of like Watchmen, and just does such an effective job of showing the downsides and like the potential downsides of if there was a superhero ever to begin with. And that's where it ends.
Yeah. Good job, Mike.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we've come to another beautiful end of this here podcast. Let me get in real close and talk with you real serious. Like, guys, we're in trouble. Not really. But we could use some more viewers. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, it'd be real nice if you listen to the podcast, you like the podcast. If you told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, that's like already like maybe 20 people. I don't know.
At least
somebody else could do that. Doesn't matter. It'd be 20 more people than listen now. That's our call to action to you. Get 2 friends to listen to our podcast. That would be really great. Here's another call to action for you. If there's anything in the realm of entertainment that we haven't done yet here on this show, hit us up. You can do that in a couple of different ways. The easiest way is to go to our website, www.entertainthis.com/ET-podcast. Scroll all the way to the bottom and fill out the little questionnaire there. It gets sent straight to us. Or you can just email us. We're entertainthispodcast@gmail.com. Email us those suggestions. You can also find us on Twitter. We are entertain_this. On Instagram, we are entertain this podcast. And on Facebook, we are podcast entertain this. And until next time, entertain us so we can entertain you, and you can entertain this. See you next Friday. Bye!
Bye!